The iron hinges on the gates of the Tower of London have not seized in over 600 years. Not once. The men who installed them did not use a spray can. They did not have a parts store. They paid nothing. And the substance they used outlasts every product sitting on the shelf in your garage right now by a full decade. The can you bought last year cost $4. What a medieval blacksmith paid was $0. That gap is not an accident. There is one decision behind it. One decision that made iron last for centuries. And it has been sitting in front of you this entire time. You have probably already noticed something odd about the way we maintain metal today. You buy a product, it works for a week, you buy more. The hinge squeaks again, the blade rusts again, the chain needs another spray, it never really ends. You probably suspected that was not a coincidence. You were right. In a moment you will understand exactly why. But first, you need to know what the people who built the Tower of London actually knew. Because the information did not disappear. It was made inconvenient. The year it was made inconvenient is on record. That is what comes next. In 1953, a company called the Rocket Chemical Company in San Diego filed the formula for a petroleum-based water displacement product. They called it Water Displacement Formula Number 40. You know it as WD-40. According to the WD-40 company's own investor filings, that single product line now generates over $500 million a year. Not from a category of products, from one formula. One formula that replaced something people had been using for free for over 1,000 years. Not wrong. Inconvenient. The year was 1953. What was made inconvenient that year is exactly what comes next. This is not a new idea. It is the oldest lubrication and metal protection technology in the documented record of human craft. Theophilus Presbyter was a German monk who wrote a manuscript around 1120 AD called De Diversis Artibus. It is one of the most complete technical manuals to survive the medieval period, and it is held today in institutional libraries across Europe. In it, Theophilus does not invent anything. He records what craftsmen in his time already know as common practice. He describes how artisans press oil from flax seeds and apply it to iron surfaces to seal them against moisture. Flax oil, what we call linseed oil, a product you can press yourself from seed at zero cost, or buy in a 1-liter bottle for $8. He was not describing an experiment. He was describing a routine so standard it needed no further explanation. Not wrong. Inconvenient. Exactly how it worked. That is what comes next. The monks at Fountains Abbey in Yorkshire understood this at scale. Fountains Abbey was established in 1132, according to the Cistercian records, held by the Yorkshire Archaeological Society. By the 13th century, it was one of the largest functioning monastic estates in England. Historian Glyn Coppack, in his 2003 book Fountains Abbey, published by Tempest, documents how the abbey operated a comprehensive iron maintenance system using nothing more than the output of its own linseed press. The same press used for lamp oil and timber treatment also supplied the oil for every iron fitting on the estate. That included a watermill, a forge, granary hardware, and over 4 miles of drainage channels fitted with iron sluice gates. Everything. Maintained at zero materials cost by the same process Theophilus Presbyter described 3 centuries earlier. And the principle that makes all of it work starts with one idea so simple it fits in a single sentence. It is not a coating, it becomes the metal. Now here is the number that should change how you think about this entire conversation. The global lubricants market was valued at $133 billion in 2023, according to Grandview Research. $133 billion. For a category of products that replaces something a 12th century monk described in a manuscript that has been freely available in university libraries since the Renaissance. A small number of people using the medieval process today pay nothing for it. No bills, no supplier, no service contract, and almost nobody is using it. You need to understand why it works before you can use it correctly. Here is how you already understand the mechanism without knowing the name for it. You have probably left a pan of cooking oil on a hot stove too long. It goes dark. It stops flowing. It becomes something almost like a plastic. That is not a mistake. That is the exact chemical process that makes this method work on iron. The oil does not stay oil. It transforms. It absorbs oxygen from the air and the molecules chain together into a hard, locked network. That network does not sit on top of the iron. It penetrates the microscopic pores in the metal surface and then locks inside them. Do you trust your tap water? The government and water companies are leaving dangerous toxins behind. Independent studies show chemicals they aren't even testing for. Your health is in your hands, not theirs. Stop paying for poisoned water. My guide reveals a $1 method to get 100% pure water at home. Scan the QR code or click the link below to get your free copy now. It does not coat the iron. It becomes part of the iron. The WD-40 evaporates. According to a product comparison published by the Engineering Toolbox in 2021, petroleum displacement sprays lose their lubricating film within 72 hours under normal workshop conditions. 72 hours. Then you are back where you started. A correctly applied linseed oil treatment is still active on iron after 2 years without reapplication. You have also probably noticed that old cast iron cookware never rusts. The pans your grandmother kept, the ones nobody ever bought a product for, the ones that are still black and smooth after 50 years of use, that is the same process. The oil used for cooking, applied repeatedly over decades, polymerized into a permanent protective layer inside the iron. Nobody planned it, nobody bought anything. It just happened because the physics works. The same physics works on your hinges, your tools, your gate hardware, and your workshop equipment. And the first step most people get wrong is the one they think is optional. That mistake is coming up. Here's what you need. I want to be honest about every number. Raw linseed oil. Not boiled linseed oil from the hardware store, raw. Boiled linseed oil has chemical drying agents added to it that accelerate the curing process, but also introduce compounds that can become brittle over time on metal. Raw linseed oil cures more slowly and bonds more durably. A 1 liter bottle costs approximately $8. If you grow or source flaxseed yourself, the oil is pressed for free. That is your base. A small amount of pine tar. Medieval craftsmen sourced this from slow-burning pine wood as a natural byproduct of charcoal production. You can buy a jar for roughly $6. Research published by the Journal of Cultural Heritage in 2018, which analyzed the composition of historical iron coatings recovered from northern European sites dated between 1200 and 1400 AD, found pine tar present in a significant proportion of the surviving samples. It extends water resistance and adhesion significantly. This is optional, but it matters. A lint-free cloth or a piece of smooth leather, that is genuinely it. Here's the one thing most people get wrong. They apply the oil cold, they read an article or watch a video, they get the oil, they wipe it onto a room temperature piece of iron, and they assume that is the treatment. It is not the treatment. Cold metal does not allow the oil to enter the microscopic pores in the surface. The oil sits on top, and anything sitting on top of iron rather than bonded inside it will eventually separate, crack, and leave the surface more exposed than it was before you started. The workshop instructions, preserved in the Mendel House books, a guild record from Nuremberg dating to 1388 and held today at the Stadtbibliothek Nuremberg, are explicit on this point. The sequence is always heat the metal first, not red hot, not glowing, warm enough that holding your hand near the surface is uncomfortable but not impossible. When the metal reaches that temperature, apply the oil in a very thin layer using the cloth or leather. Thin, not thick, not wet. Thin. The mistake is almost always applying too much at once. The thick layer does not cure faster. It never fully cures at all. It stays tacky. It goes rancid in humid conditions. It collects dust and grit and becomes a problem instead of a solution. One thin coat on warm metal. Wipe away every trace of excess immediately. Then leave it for 24 hours. The step most people skip is the cure. They wipe it on and put the tool away while it is still wet. Stay with this, because what happens in those 24 hours is exactly why this outlasts petroleum by 10 years. The process is called oxidative polymerization. That sounds like a chemistry class. Here's what it actually means. The oil molecules in raw linseed oil contain double chemical bonds. When the oil sits on a warm iron surface exposed to air, those double bonds absorb oxygen molecules from the atmosphere and start linking to each other. They form long chains. The chains tangle together into a rigid, three-dimensional network. That network is physically locked into the iron because the oil penetrated the pores while the metal was warm and the surface was open. Now it cannot be removed without abrading the surface itself. It is not a film you put on top of something. It is part of the object. WD-40 has no double bonds available for polymerization. Petroleum compounds evaporate. They cannot do this. According to the work of Dr. Robert Baboyan, a material scientist whose research on corrosion science and engineering is widely cited in conservation literature, linseed oil forms a cross-linked polymer network on ferrous surfaces with an adhesion strength 3 to 5 times greater than petroleum-based films. 3 to 5 times. That is not a marginal improvement. That is a different category of protection. You apply one coat. You reapply every 12 to 18 months, depending on weather exposure. Not every week, not every time it rains, not every time you use the tool, once, and then mostly leave it alone. Now think bigger. What we just described works for a single hinge, a single blade, a single set of garden tools. That is already useful. But what a community of hundreds did with this same principle at full estate scale changes how you think about the entire problem. The monks at Fountains Abbey were not individually oiling individual tools. According to Glyn Kopak's research, the Abbey operated its linseed press on a seasonal maintenance schedule. Once a year, before the wet season, every iron fitting across the entire estate was treated. The same lay brothers who grew the flax, processed the oil, and applied the treatment systematically across every mechanism on the property. A water mill with iron bearings, sluice gates exposed to constant water contact, forge tools, granary locks, 4 miles of drainage hardware, all of it, on a single annual maintenance cycle, at zero materials cost. No bills, no infrastructure, no asking anyone's permission. What one person does on a Saturday afternoon is useful. What an entire self-sufficient community did across a working estate for 4 centuries is a model for how maintenance is supposed to work. There is one condition where this works less well. It is worth knowing before you start. Raw linseed oil performs at its best on bare iron, cast iron, wrought iron, and lightly surface-rusted steel where the metal pores are still open and accessible. On steel that has been heavily galvanized, powder-coated, or treated with modern industrial primers, the penetration is significantly reduced. Those surface coatings have already sealed the pores. The oil cannot enter. It sits on top the same way WD-40 does and provides only limited surface-level protection. If you are working with modern galvanized, steel, or factory-coated hardware, you still get some benefit, but you do not get the deep bonding that makes this treatment last for years. For coated modern metals, a tallow-based blend, which is rendered animal fat, and which Theophilus Presbyter also describes in De Diversis Artibus alongside the linseed oil method, provides better surface adhesion because the fat molecules interact with the outer coating, rather than relying on pore penetration. The limitation is real and specific. Knowing it means you apply the right treatment to the right surface. That is what correct use looks like. One more honest note before the end. This process takes patience that a spray can does not require. The heat step is real. The cure time is real. The application requires attention to how much oil you are putting on. If you are in a rainstorm at 11 at night with a seized lock and a can of WD-40 in your coat pocket, the can wins that moment. The medieval approach is not an emergency tool. It is a maintenance philosophy. It is the difference between spending 15 minutes once a year on a dry afternoon and spending 15 minutes every other week because the last thing you used evaporated and the rust came back. The craftsman at Fountains Abbey was not reacting to problems. He was preventing them. The shift from reactive maintenance to preventive treatment is the actual technology here. The oil is just the vehicle for it. You can go to the Tower of London right now. The gates are still there. The iron is still there. The hinges still move. A property maintained continuously since the 11th century. According to historic royal palaces, the organization responsible for the tower's upkeep, traditional iron maintenance methods remain in use in the conservation of the oldest hardware on the site. The physics that makes linseed oil bond to ferrous metal has not changed since Theophilus Presbyter sat down in a German monastery in 1120 and wrote it out. The flax still grows, the oil still presses, the polymerization still happens. What you just learned does the same thing to the iron in your garage, your workshop, your gates, and your tools that it has been doing to historic iron across northern Europe for 9 centuries. I do not know what brought you here today. Maybe a rusty hinge you keep meaning to fix. Maybe a can of something that stopped working after a week. Maybe you just suspected that a $4 spray invented in 1953 was not the end of the story. It does not matter. You were right. It works either way.